As a developer, you could be involved in new feature development or supporting and maintaining applications for your customers. If you are involved in new feature development, you could be spending a considerable amount of your time in writing unit test cases, debugging, or optimizing code. On the other hand, if you are supporting applications for your customers, you could be spending days, weeks, or sometimes months to even understand the intent of the application. Furthermore, you could be spending a significant portion of your time to upgrade your existing applications to the latest version of a programming language. Today, we are here to show you how you can supercharge your development with the help of the generative AI developer tools available on AWS. Hi all, good afternoon. My name is Bindu, and for the session today, I'm joined by my colleague Matt. Let's get started. The major focus for today will be Amazon Q Developer and Amazon Code Whisperer. I will start off giving you an overview of these services, but every now and then I will hand it over to Matt, where he will take you through a demo where he'll dive deeper into the capabilities. But even before that, I would like to spend some time in understanding the challenges and the friction points that exist in the software development lifecycle. This is a recent study from Gartner. It's astounding to see that 73% of a developer's time is spent in running and maintaining applications, whereas only 27% of a developer's time is spent in transformation and innovation. We want to flip that equation for you. But even before that, I'd like to understand what is making developers spend so much time. A very common scenario is encountering errors in the application. So the moment you see an error, you would go ahead, perform your root cause analysis by manually going through logs or digesting metrics. Once you know what the root cause is, then you would move on to devising a solution and are then moving on to making code changes or configuration changes and then finally deploying it to production. But all this can take hours, days, or sometimes even weeks of your precious time. Here's another analysis by software.com. But data was collected from more than 250,000 developers worldwide over a span of 3 months. And this is what they found. The median time that a developer spends in writing and editing code is less than 1 hour a day. And only 10% of the developers spend more than 2 hours in writing code. This once again begs the question, why aren't developers able to spend time in the things they love, like writing new code, building new applications, and more importantly, writing business-critical functionalities? What are the challenges that they face here? So any development task which is given to you would ideally flow through these 5 phases. Unfortunately, developers spend most of their time in other phases like research, design, testing, and maintenance when compared to the development phase. For example, let's take the research phase, where developers spend a considerable amount of their time in analyzing the requirements. And if it's an existing application, you may have to navigate through complex code bases, and during design phase, you may have to understand the existing architecture, and so on. No wonder developers are able to spend less than 10% of their time in writing code. We have examined the entire application development lifecycle to identify opportunities which can eliminate these time-consuming tasks which you do repetitively in a manual manner, and also looked out for opportunities where generative AI can help you in reducing this time spent during application and maintenance life cycles. Today, I'm very excited to dive deeper into Amazon Q with you. Amazon Q is a generative AI-powered assistant which is designed for your work, and it can be tailored to work on top of your business, data, code, and operations. As of today, Amazon Q is in preview and will be generally available soon. Amazon Q has multiple areas of expertise for meeting the requirements of different users and the roles they play within your organization. For example, Q is your business expert. You can connect Q to your company's information repositories or your enterprise systems, and Q can be tailored to have conversations with your business users, generate content for marketing teams, solve problems, and even take action on top of your data. Amazon Q and Amazon QuickSight can help organizations derive insights on business in a very visual way. Amazon Q and Amazon Connect can help contact service agents provide better customer service to their customers. And coming soon is Amazon Q in AWS Supply Chain, which provides supply and demand planners, inventory managers gain better insight into the supply chain. However, our focus for today will be Amazon Q Developer, and let's delve deeper into it. Amazon Q is your expert for building on AWS. The foundation model which powers Amazon Q has been trained with over 17 years worth of AWS information and open source code and data. And thereby, you can ask questions to Q, and it can come back with quick and accurate answers. You can also ask Q to help you with architectural best practices, and you can also ask Q to help you in diagnosing errors, troubleshooting, and solving errors for you. Let's say you are on the AWS console, and you encounter an error like an S3 configuration error or a EC2 permissions issue. All you need to do is to click on the button that says Troubleshoot with Amazon Q, and Q, with its understanding about your workload, can diagnose, and it can also come up with step-by-step instructions of how to potentially fix these errors. So this way, you can solve your errors much quicker and also get to production much faster. There could have been instances where you have been asked to provide enhancements on top of existing features and code. With Amazon Q in the IDE, you can ask questions about this existing code, and Q can be able to answer those questions for you and explain it to you. And you can go ahead and refactor this existing code. You may want to optimize it, and sometimes you may see errors, and you can go ahead and fix it with the help of Q. Many a times, existing code may not provide you the test coverage that you would expect. With the help of Q, you can go ahead and write unit test cases, and that way improve the test coverage of existing code. Another very exciting feature of Amazon Q is feature development. With this feature, you can get from ideation to production within minutes. So what Q does is to get an understanding about your existing workspace, and after which it takes in your prompt, which is in natural language, and breaks down your prompt into multiple logical implementation steps. Like it can be generating code, generating unit test cases, API integration, and many more. After which, you can interact with Q, you can review it, you can iterate through it, and once you're completed with your review, then you can go ahead and seek Q's help in implementing each of these steps. This is something that Matt will delve into deeper during his demo. If you are someone who is involved in performing code reviews for your team, then Amazon Q can help you reduce the time spent in performing the activity by summarizing the pull requests and also the code review feedback. And finally, you can upgrade your existing applications to the latest version of a programming language using the guided code reviews, transformations. So as of now, these code transformations are available from Java 8 to Java 17, and .NET Framework to cross-platform .NET upgrades are coming pretty soon. So here's a testimony. Recently, a 5-person Amazon team were able to transform the applications from Java 8 to Java 17, around 1,000 applications in a span of 2 days, where each transformation took 10 minutes on an average, and the longest one took less than 1 hour. So this explains that previously, developers could have spent somewhere between 2 to 3 days in upgrading a single application. We believe that this is going to be a game changer in freeing up your time so that you can focus on what's more important for you and the organization. Well, where can I find Q? In fact, you can find Q across. As a developer, you could start your day with Q in the AWS Management Console or in the AWS documentation website. Then you can move on to using Q in the IDE, use Q to interact with your teams using Teams or Slack, and finally finish off your day using Q in Amazon Code Catalyst, which is our unified development environment. With that, I hand it over to Matt for a demo where he would take you through a day in the life of a developer using Amazon Q. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Bindu. Okay, so we've just learned about Amazon Q, some of the capabilities. I want to take you on a tour of some of these capabilities. And as we go along, I'm going to come up with a sort of an example to give you some sort of narrative around this. So perhaps I'm a developer that's just joined a new team. I've been shown the application by my lead developer. So this is an application that summarizes a document. So our customers would upload a document. It will then summarize that. In this case, it's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. We're going to use some kind of generative AI tool to summarize the document, get the salient points from the document, and then we're going to create a word map from it. So the team's application pretty much generates a word cloud application. So I'm going to look at the architecture here of what we're building. So this is sort of an example of a modern application here. So we have a containerized Python application in the front end. We've got a serverless API pattern here. So we're using API gateway, and we've got a couple of lambdas behind it. One written in TypeScript, and this will be the one that interacts with our generative AI service, Amazon Bedrock here. So this will be generating the summarization of the document. But what we're going to focus on today is the word cloud generator, the Java app, just on the bottom right-hand corner. I could zoom into any three of these, but I'm going to pick that one today to talk about how we can use Amazon Q to improve it. And my lead developer tells me there's a couple of issues that need addressing. So two of the tasks that I'm going to look at today. So we need to upload word cloud images to Amazon S3, and then there's a maintenance task that I need to take on with this application as well. And if we look at the first task, let's have a look at what the issue is. So we can see here that the API is actually returning the image in bytes here. Now, we don't want that. We actually want it to return a link to the file that's been created rather than stream it in a byte array via the API. So I'm going to start looking at this. And the first thing I'm going to do is just do a bit of research. Yeah. So the first thing is to go into the console, and you'll see here that we've embedded Amazon Q across AWS. So in the console now, we have it in the right-hand toolbar. And this is where we create the conversational questions with Q. So I can ask some questions like, what is S3? I might be, this is a silly question if you know about AWS, but maybe I'm new to AWS as well, and I don't really want to ask the lead developer things like this. So Q will come back to me. It will give me some bullet points with the salient points of S3. There'll be paragraphs here, and also citations, so that I know that I can go to the actual documentation, the service documentation, blogs, to actually reference what it's returning. This is where the conversational part comes in. I'm having a conversation with Q now, so how do I upload a file? And it knows that I'm talking about S3 because it's got the context of the conversation already. So Q will go off, knows it's talking about S3, and it's telling me I can use the AWS CLI here. It's even giving me a command that I can use, so I can start investigating how S3 works, how we upload files. This is great. I've got more documentation here for extra reading, but I don't want to use the CLI here. We've got a Java app. I want to know, how do I upload a file with Java? So let's see if Q can actually help me here as well. Note that I'm not putting S3 here. I'm just saying, how do I upload a file using Java? It knows the context in my conversation. Okay, so Q's come back to me again. It's been quite helpful here. So to upload a file to S3 from Java, I can use the AWS SDK. Super useful. It's even given me some code that I can start playing with here. So I know that I need to use the S3 client builder here, and it tells me the command that I can use, put object, and I can upload the file to S3 using that. That's great. So when I have lunch with my lead developer and he asks me, how far have you got here? I've got some good information I can have a conversation about. I understand more about S3. I understand how I can upload a file. So my next part is I'm going to go into the actual code itself. So I'm going to open my Java app in Visual Studio Code. It also works in IntelliJ products as well. For this example, I'm using Visual Studio Code. So I can open the file here. There's a lot of Java code here. I'm not quite sure what all of it does. So Q is available in the toolbar on the left in Visual Studio Code, available via the AWS toolkit. I can start asking, what does this application do? And for me, to read through all this code, it would take me quite a long time to understand it. And Q can digest the application and give me a summary of it here. A couple of paragraphs to explain what it is, some bullet points. It understands some of the context, the behavior, and then it's got a summary at the bottom to tell me what it does. So this is great. So what I also want to do now is actually ask a few more questions of it, yeah? So if I want to upload a file to S3, how do I get a link to that file? I want to understand how I can do that, because in my previous prompt engineering with Q, my conversation, we talked about how to upload it, but now I want to return the link to that file. So Q's come back to me again. It's given me some really useful advice here. It's talking about something called a pre-signed URL. So I can use a pre-signed URL to return a link. It's a time-generated URL, and I can return that on the API instead of actually serializing the actual file itself. That's useful, so I know how to do that. But how do I generate a pre-signed URL in Java? Let's ask Q to see if we can actually get some code for that. I'm guessing we're going to use the AWS SDK here. Okay. So now I can see that Q has come back. It's actually giving me some code. It's actually telling me that the URL can be used for get and put operations. There's an example here. It's telling me that I need to use the Java SDK, and I've got actually some code here. So I can configure the S3 client, and I can actually generate the pre-signed URL from this. You'll notice in the code that it's providing, I can use the copy function. There's an insert at cursor. And there's also get and put operations it's talking about here that we can use. That's great, super useful. So the next thing I need to do is I need to start thinking about the implementation. So I need to create this S3 bucket to upload to Amazon S3. So I'm going to go into my infrastructure as code, which in this case, I can see that it's CDK code. So I'm going to go into my backend stack here, which I can see the Lambda is defined here. So how do I create an S3 bucket with CDK code? So this is going to be interesting because I'm not massively familiar with CDK, so it'll be useful for me to find out how this works. So again, queues come back fairly quickly. It's looking at the context in the file. It's actually telling me here how to create this in the CDK stack. It's given me some code. And I'm sure many of you have noticed that actually we've just switched from the application code in Java to the infrastructure as code being written in Python. It knows that we're working with Python now because that Python file is open in the IDE. Yeah, so it's got that context. So it's going to generate the CDK code in Python, not Java. So I've got the code here that I can use. So I can actually get this and I can copy it and I can paste it into my CDK. So this is great. I've got the bucket there. It's added a few more things like the bucket name. I don't want to hard code that. I'm going to get the CDK to generate that bucket name for me. But the next thing I know is, like with AWS resources, security is a thing. Yeah, so you can't just start interacting with these resources without permissions. So I need to give my Lambda permissions to interact with this bucket. So it needs to be able to read and write to it. So let's ask Q how it can give me these permissions for the Lambda function to be able to read and write the files from the S3 bucket. Okay, so again, we're getting another answer here. It's using Python, it knows that. So it's telling me, give me a bit of context about how to do this. There's a helper function I can use here, grant, read, write, and I can pass in the Lambda function here, and that should give the permissions that I need. So I can copy this below the function declaration, and now I can give my Lambda function permission to write to S3. There's one more step I need to do. So when I'm going to hop back into my Lambda code to implement this function, I need to be able to access the S3 bucket as well. So I need to add that to my Lambda function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that Lambda function, the code, and I'm going to send it to Q, and I'm going to ask it, because I can't remember off the top of my head, what is the parameter that I need to add a variable into my Lambda function, so an environment variable. So we've pasted the code in, sent it to Q, and then we're going to ask it, how can we add a parameter for the S3 bucket? So what I'm hoping this will do is it will take my code and it will augment it with the environment variable. So I can see that's exactly what it's done here. So it knows to use the environment equals, and it can put the bucket name. And also, you notice here, it's using word cloud bucket. It's actually using the same context that's in the code. So I don't even have to change that. I can just copy and paste it straight in, and this will work. It's actually referencing the bucket name. That's great. So I now have the infrastructure sorted out. I've got my Lambda, I've got my bucket created, I've got permissions, and I'm also passing in the S3 bucket as a parameter. This is great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go hop back into the Java code, and we're going to implement the feature. So this is going to be using a new feature, a feature development feature that we have in Q, using the /dev command. What this does is it means using /dev, I can describe what I want in natural language. Yeah, so I'm going to describe to Q what I really want, which is to upload the cloud API. I want to upload the generated image to S3. We know how to do that. We did that right at the beginning, with the upload methods. We want to return a pre-signed URL. We also know about that because we did our research not so long ago when we were in the IDE. And then I also want to tell Q about the environment variable. It might not know about that at the moment. So the S3 bucket name will be available in the bucket name environment variable. So what Q is going to do now is it's going to analyze the code and create a plan about how to implement this feature. It's going to be reviewing all the files that it needs to change. And when it's done this, it will give me a plan of action, the steps that it can take. This is similar to how I would look at the code. I would have a number of steps that I would take when I'm developing this feature. So I need to update the response. So instead of returning a byte array, I might return a string with the URL in it. Some of the handling might change, how I reference the bucket name. This is all good stuff. I can review this. If there's going to be some kind of update that I need to give to my team, I can use this to actually help with my update that I'm going to provide about the work I'm going to do. There's a button at the bottom here called Write Code. So we can use this. And what this is going to do is this is going to actually take the steps and it's actually going to convert it into a diff. So it's going to actually create the code as a diff, similar to how you might review a pull request in Git, in one of the Git services you use. So we're actually going to generate some code. It's not going to actually update the code yet. It's just going to show me the diff, so how it plans to implement this with code. So I can see here we've got a tree view with the files that it's suggesting to change. Got the workload generator, the response. Actually, it's even updated the unit tests here. That's really cool because they're quite hot on code coverage at this company. So let's take a look at the generator first. It's brilliant. It's using the S3 client here. I can see here that it's using s3.putObject, which is what we wanted it to do. And it's actually generating the pre-signed URL using s3.generated pre-signed URL. This should be familiar to most developers. The red lines are obviously the lines of code it's removing. The green lines are the codes that it's generated and it's going to add. So here, and then when we look at the response, it's changed from returning a byte array. We're now actually returning a string with the workload URL instead. So we're actually getting a response. Now, let's take a look at the unit test as well. So just reading this now, and to me, it doesn't quite look right. So we're actually interacting. So it's getting the URL and then it's trying to read the file from the URL here, yeah? So with a unit test, I don't want to start testing AWS and AWS resources. I don't want to test S3. I'll leave AWS to do that. I want to test the behavior in my API. So I want to test the business logic. So I think we should really be mocking the S3 clients here and actually just testing the behavior here. So we want to be returning a pre-signed URL. So you'll notice here I've got two choices. I can accept this or I can add some additional feedback. So what I'm going to do is iterate on this and I'm going to add a bit more feedback. I'm going to be a bit more descriptive this time about what I really want because I think I want Q to actually change this. So I'm going to say in the validate image unit test, I want you to mock the S3 client. This is part of the prompt engineering and some of the art of prompt engineering. So sometimes we don't add enough context, sometimes we add too much. And it's one of the things we're getting used to as we're using prompt engineering when we're adding this into our development lifecycle and the way we use generative AI. So this is part of the skill. And maybe I could have been more articulate in the first prompt and it would have generated the code better. Maybe I should have done something left. The other thing I noticed here is that it didn't put the imports to the AWS SDK. Yeah, so when we briefly flicked up, I could see that here. So obviously, when we're trying to create the S3 client here, that's not going to work. We need to add the imports. So I'm going to ask Q here to actually also, can you add the imports? You'll notice I'm adding quite a lot of text here with this question to Q. As well as that, yeah, we probably need to update the pom.xml as a Maven file. So we need to actually update that so we actually get the dependencies in the project as well. So let's send this to Q. What it's going to do is iterate on this project in the same way if I was working with a developer next to me. We would be having a conversation. Hey, you've missed the import. Why don't you add the import? Hey, what about adding the dependency? You're not mocking the S3 client properly. So Q's going to go off and do this for me. Again, I've got the same options. I can accept these changes or provide more feedback, and I can keep going with that feedback. So let's have a look at the code before I make a decision. So let's have a look at the word cloud generator. I can see the imports are in there now. We've been more specific about that, more explicit about what we want. The rest of this code is largely unchanged. I think that works. It looks okay to me. If we have a look at the word cloud response, that looks okay. We've added a JSON property with the URL now. That's good. And let's have a look at the unit test. Right. So still not mocking properly. It has added the imports, but not 100% there. So we are actually pushing the boundaries here with this. It hasn't quite done what I want, but I'm pretty happy with the implementation and the response. I think I can take on the unit test myself. You know, this would be quite interesting for me to actually just finish off this last bit of this pull request that I'm going to submit. And this actually reminds me of like my prompt engineering skills and how these work when we interact with these sort of generative AI models here. So quite pleased with that. That works quite well. So I can close the session, I can submit that to my code base, and I can work on finishing this unit test. So when I return when I test the API now, I'm actually getting a pre-signed URL here instead of the byte array. So I think I can mark that as done. What I'm going to look at now is a maintenance task, upgrading to Java 17. And I'll just show you how this works. So we're back in the Java app again. But this time what we're going to use is a function called transform. So what we're doing here is look at this. This is a Java 8 app. It's using some old imports here for base64 encoding and a few other things. So what I'm going to do is instead of me doing the upgrade, I'm going to get Amazon Q to do the upgrade using something called transform. So what this does is it builds a secure build environment. It's going to upload the code and try to build it with Java 8. And once it's done that, it's going to start to make change. It's going to try and compile it as under Java 17, and then it's going to try and make changes. When it gets an error, it's going to address that error, fix it, and then try and build again, correct the next error, fix it. In the same way that URI would do an upgrade, this task. We'd look at the log trail, the errors, we'd try and fix them one by one, and then we would keep compiling and try and build it with Java 18. So Bindu mentioned this earlier. Actually, we used it within Amazon itself when we've got a large Java code base here at Amazon, and this was used to upgrade many of the microservices. So the example was given was 1,000 of these done in 2 days. So this works at scale. This is going to be used for helping customers move from Windows to Linux. For example, maybe they're using .NET framework. They want to upgrade to .NET Core, .NET 7, .NET 8, and leverage the advantages that brings. So watch out for that, because that will be coming soon as well. So you can see here, we're still in step 1. We're updating the dependencies and code, working on the library. And then step 2 is building in Java 17 and fixing any issues. So the transformation cub will carry on doing this until it's actually found a fix. And then hopefully at the end of this, we will get a plan of action, similar to when we did the prompt engineering earlier, of what changes need to be made to upgrade this. So we're just finalizing here. Great, we've got the proposed changes. Let's download these changes and have a look. So I can see here there are 3 files that have been changed. So here we go in the pom.xml. I can see that we're now targeting 17. I can see there was some dependency changes here in Lombok. We had to upgrade that. And then let's have a look in the Java code itself. Okay, so we're actually using the native base64 library here. We don't need to import this older library. And the way the syntax works with some of the initialization there has changed as well for Java 17. So we've made some optimizations there. And the way the base64 coder is used, we've updated the code there as well, all automatically. So this is good news. It saved me a lot of research. Maybe I'm not as fluent in Java, and using this transformation process helps me speed up this considerably. So that's another task done. Now, you'll notice that I've actually spent a lot of time with prompt engineering here. I haven't actually written very much code at all. In fact, I don't think I wrote any code here. So as developers, prompt engineering is such a useful feature, but actually we spend a lot of our time in the IDE writing code. So I'm just going to hand you back to Bindu to talk about how Amazon Code Whisperer can help you with this.
Thank you, Matt, for that insightful demo. Amazon Code Whisperer. Amazon Code Whisperer is an AI-powered productivity tool for the IDE as well as the command line. To start off with, you will need to do a minimum bit of configuration, and once that is done, you can dive right into your IDE and start typing in. And as you're typing in, you will see that Code Whisperer will start generating code recommendations for you. Let's say I want to write a Lambda function which takes in an API request and passes it and stores the values into a DynamoDB table. As I'm typing in the comment explaining this functionality, 1, Code Whisperer will autocomplete the entire comment for me, and 2, Code Whisperer will autocomplete the entire function for me. This way, developers can complete their coding tasks much faster. A very important feature of Code Whisperer is the ability to scan code. You can scan your code for hard-to-find vulnerabilities, including the top 10 OWASP, those that do not meet the crypto library best practices, and the AWS internal security best practices, and so on. So it doesn't stop there. Code Whisperer also provides you ways by which you can go ahead and remediate these vulnerabilities. Ideally, it provides you code suggestions to do so. You can meet your software copyright and license attribution expectation with the help of the intelligent code tracking feature. So what Code Whisperer does is it generates original code, and it also flags code which is similar to the open source code. So you as a developer can then choose to include it in your project or not. And if you choose to include it, then you can provide the proper license attribution to it as well. On the other hand, you can go ahead and disable this functionality altogether in Code Whisperer, and Code Whisperer will not provide you these open source recommendations going forward. We heard our customers say that they want Code Whisperer to provide personalized code recommendations by taking into account the internal code repositories. So Code Whisperer customization can be connected to your internal code repositories in a secure manner, and then it will take account of your internal APIs, libraries, packages, classes, methods, and many more, and provide personalized code recommendations as well. Because Code Whisperer can generate a lot of code for you, it can accelerate developer productivity. During preview, Amazon ran a productivity challenge, and the participants who used Code Whisperer were 27% more likely to complete the task successfully and did so at an average of 57% faster than those who did not use Code Whisperer. You can use Code Whisperer with your favorite tools. As far as the IDEs are concerned, you can use it via an extension in VS Code, IntelliJ, and most of JetBrains IDEs. It is available natively in AWS Cloud9, AWS Lambda Console, SageMaker Studio, and Glue Studio. It supports 15 programming languages, and it also supports infrastructure as code, including CDK, CloudFormation, and Terraform. It supports IDE style completions for more than 500 plus CLIs today, including the most used ones like Docker, Git, NPM, and many more. Well, to sum up the benefits, first of all, Code Whisperer accelerates developer productivity. You can not only quickly accomplish your basic coding tasks, but also the complex ones, especially where you are unfamiliar with certain APIs and frameworks. 2, it is optimized for AWS. In addition to Code Whisperer being a general purpose coding companion, it is optimized for the most used AWS services like Amazon EC2, Amazon S3, and many more. It ensures that you are coding responsibly with the help of the reference tracking feature. And you can improve your application security with the help of the code scanning feature. And finally, you can use it with your favorite tools like your IDEs, your CLIs, and programming languages. With that, I once again hand it over to Matt for a short demo on Code Whisperer.
Thanks, Bindi. OK, so Code Whisperer works in your IDE. So while you're writing code, it will come up with intelligent suggestions. You don't even have to use prompt engineering here. So it's been trained on internal AWS source code, open source as well. So it will come up with sensible suggestions here. A bit like how IntelliSense does for you at the moment, but this is more. It actually understands your code. It understands the code that's already in your files. So if you have a certain coding style or you've used functions elsewhere, your own functions, it will use that when you're writing your code to help you. You can use prompt engineering as well. For example, here, we're using prompt engineering here to create a function. And this will generate single-line, multi-line functions. If you don't like the first generative code that it's generated, you can flick through. It'll offer multiple suggestions here. Some typical examples can be, oh, can you write me a unit test for this function? I need a function to do X, Y, Z. This is the behavior that I'm looking for here. And you know, it will match the code styles and the developer patterns that you're using already in your code base. It's also available in the terminal, in the Bash terminal here. Yeah, so you can use Amazon Q here. You can write natural language requests in the Bash terminal and it can generate the commands. So, you know, for example, I want to be able to query an S3 bucket, or I want to be able to copy files from one directory to another. Q can be used here to generate those Bash scripts and those commands for you. It's not just AWS as well. It's trained with over 500 CLIs. So, for example, Git, you know, Python, other tools that you might use day to day. You can use this to actually interact with that and give you an advantage. One of the most common things we get with these tools, the generative AI tools, is, this is great, but I don't want Amazon to be using my code to train their models. I don't want my code shared outside of my organization. That's fine, we don't do that. We're not going to do that with your code. But then they're like, well, actually, we have a lot of code internally. We've got our own SDKs, our own APIs, our own libraries our developers use. It'd be great if we could actually use that as well, and you can. So with Code Whisperer customizations, you can point the Code Whisperer model at your own internal code repositories here. And so what this means is that when you're writing your code on your own libraries, your own frameworks, your own SDKs, it knows about them, it understands them, and it can give you that context that you need. You can use the generative AI capabilities, the prompt engineering on your own code bases. The security's there as well. So some developers might not want to have access to other areas of your code base. You can limit it as well with all the security controls in place. If you want to get started with Q, there's a few QR codes here. I'll leave this up for a few moments. In particular, the workshop on the right is really good to show you some examples to go further than what we've done today. Okay. You can see a few more phones. All right. And if you want to learn more about AWS, I recommend going to skillbuilder.aws. There's over 600 courses there available for free, so on a range of subjects. If you want to go deeper, there's a subscription service there where they can give some more in-depth courses there available to you. I'd like to say thank you. I've been Matt and this is Bindu. Please use our survey here to give us some feedback on this talk today. We'd love to hear your feedback. And Bindu and I will be around afterwards if you want to come and ask us some more questions about this. Thank you.
Thank you.